Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and as you can see, I've got the tie on, we've got the Pokemon Sleep Top Hollow music playing in the background. You all know what that means. It's time for some more Pokemon Sleep news. Now, this doesn't come to us in the form of the typical news report, as it doesn't have the Pokemon Sleep news like webpage. It's from Rain on X, as a lot of the news actually comes to us from anytime it's data mines or data reported. This is where it comes to usually. And this time it's in regards to Toxel and Toxtricity. Now, these Pokemon have been added. Toxel is the baby form of both forms of Toxtricity, and we've already found out what they do. Now, they are very interesting as they have the exact same stats in every way, shape, and form. The only difference is their main skill. It's a branched evolution from Toxel. Requires 80 candies, level 23 to evolve, and having the right nature to go to whichever form it's going to be. Now, that creates some very interesting quirks, but it is a skill specialist indeed, with a pretty decently high skill trigger rate for both of them, but they both are rather slow. They're the same speed as Golem, comparatively, in this game, so, like, think about how slow Golem is. You're not relying on it for its frequency, you're relying on Golem for high ingredient rate. The same thing is true for these guys. You're not relying on getting the skill procs because of a fast frequency. You're relying on it because of the high skill trigger rate, which is definitely the case for these guys. Now that means that triggers matter more on them, as they're not going to be relying too much on pity procs, but then compared to speed. But anyway, what do? Well, Toxtricity Amp form is plus, and Toxtricity Low Key form is minus. So let's compare them to the other plus and minus Pokemon in the game. And as you can see, they're basically just strict upgrades numerically. You can see here that Toxtricity Low-Key form produces more procs per day than Minun, and Amped form produces more procs per day than Plusle. By about roughly half a proc per day for both of them. But this is not a perfect comparison. It's a bit of a better comparison for Toxtricity Low-Key form, because they are kind of trying to do the same thing. So Toxtricity Low-Key is kind of just a strict upgrade to Minun, but of a different typing, which that may come into importance when it comes to Expert Mode, where we theoretically are going to be limited based off typing. And Toxtricity Amped form does come off as a strictly better version of Plusle, but it's not. And here's where there's actually less of a comparison, because Plus gives bonus ingredients based off of whatever the Pokemon's A ingredient is, and they have different A ingredients. And one of the biggest things with these Pokemon is that they're actually competitive in how much of their ingredient they produce compared to other ingredient farmers. So we really think of them more as trying to farm that ingredient and actually being pretty good at farming that ingredient. When compared Plusle against other coffee farmers, it's actually pretty solid. And Toxtricity Amp form, well, we'll get to how it compares to other milk farmers. But they aren't really... It's not a fair comparison, because, I mean, coffee farmers produce less than milk farmers on average. So it only makes sense that Plusle procs less often than Toxtricity, since they're making a lower value ingredient compared to a higher value ingredient that's in a lot more meals. There's also less availability of coffee all around. There's less Pokemon in the game that have access to it than there are that have access to milk. And some of these Pokemon that have access to milk are some of the most common Pokemon in the game, like all the Evolutions. I feel like almost everyone's invested at least one Evolution, because it's very easy to catch a good Eevee. And most likely that Eevee has more than just one milk in its ingredient list. Potentially 2 slots. Maybe it's a mono milk one and you haven't had to worry too much about milk, because you can just kind of supplement where you need as with your Evolution. Maybe you have a Pawmot as your healer. There's a lot of different potential options. Even Swampert now has milk. A lot of Pokemon in the game have milk. Not very many have access to coffee, and a lot of the coffee ones are either island exclusives or very expensive to hunt, like Murkrow and Minun or Plusle, or are relatively new and have garbage ingredient rates, like Sceptile, or it comes in only as a C ingredient, and you're really not seeing much anyway. So, coffee is much more difficult to come by. And also, you kind of need more of it. The Metacall right now is 28 per meal versus 26 per meal for milk. So, overall, Plusle having coffee makes it a lot more valuable just at a base assessment than Toxtricity having milk. But how does it compare if we're to compare it to other milk farmers? Well, if you add these numbers together, and I'll pull it up here real quick. Rainonex is just being slow. I made a comparison of milk farmers of about equal rarity. Toxtricity getting speed up and skill up. Blastoise getting speed up and ingredients up. Same with Meowscarada. And then we'll get to this guy last. If it has the Mono Milk list, and you are synergizing it with another Pokemon on the team that can produce, that has plus or minus, and you're adding in the 6.3 from the randomness, this does produce about roughly six more milk than the Blastoise per day. It is technically the best ingredient farmer if you meet all the conditions and are alright with relying a bit more on RNG, since you're relying on skill procs, which are a much more RNG based system than ingredient procs. Ingredient rates, we have much higher numbers, which means it's much more reliable than what skills are, which is why skills have a pity proc system, whereas ingredients don't, because it's not really needed for ingredients, because the ingredient rates are high enough that not getting a single ingredient drop for ages is basically impossible. So incredibly rare that it may as well not be a consideration. That can be the case for skills, which is why they implemented the pity proc system. But this guy, he's going to be relying much more on RNG than Blastoise would to produce the milk. But theoretically, it produces more on average. Now, you probably want more buffers if you're working with this guy, because bad days are going to be much worse than the bad days with Blastoise. I'd say even probably worse than the bad days with Meowscarada. Just because Meowscarada may produce significantly less than either of these two, even when meeting all the conditions, but it's still an ingredient specialist. That's going to be a lot more reliable. And it should also be an easier hunt than these two, because theoretically these two you're looking for that mono list. And I can say that because if you look at Toxtricity Amped form with even just an ABA list, it's already doing worse than the Blastoise. It's still doing better than the Meowscarada, but interestingly, it gets a lot of value from that additional milk supplemented by its ingredient list with a mono list. And even just having more milk there does actually make a difference. If I make it ABB, and it's only making 5 off of that, which is 5 plus 83 plus 6. I mean, we're looking at like 10 here. Add that, or that's making like 90. Adding the 5 is like 95. It's getting more down by Meowscarada numbers. So even though it has the potential to be the best milk farmer in the game, this is such a degree of rarity, especially considering that if you want a good nature, there aren't very many options. It's very limited for options. And that's where I want to talk a little bit about their evolution requirements. If you look at the natures, the light ones here are ones that can evolve into amped form. The grayed out ones are the ones that go into low key. Only one of them is a skill up nature for amped form. So the only way that you can get the best one, it's going to have a sassy nature. That's just hands down. Now, I'm not quite sure if catching them fully evolved allows them to be a different nature. That doesn't really feel right if they make that the case. But I guess, I don't know if that's been proven or disproven yet in Sleep. If the one that's naturally caught in the amped form or the low-key form can have one of the other natures. But if you're evolving it, which most people will, the only ones that are going to have a skill-up nature are Sassy. Naughty's also a bad nature, because even though it's speed up, which is generally a net positive, skill down is a huge detriment to the skill, which is the primary way we're producing milk here. And Adamant and Brave are also pretty good, but Adamant also draws back from the natural ingredient productivity, which you're relying on a bit more for milk. So realistically, if you're really looking for milk, the best ones are probably Brave and Sassy. Adamant is like a secondary option, and Naughty would also just be kind of bad. Now, neutral natures are not terrible. They're not directly harmful, and some of these other ones can be harmful, like by not allowing you to even make it into an amped form, if that's what you want. But the low-key form definitely has better options going for it, with almost all the skill-up natures. Additionally, Lonely is another nice nature. It's not the skill-down variant. And also, not to mention, the only one that is skill-up is XP down. So it's going to be more expensive to raise the best of the best when it comes to an amped form Toxtricity. But that also, I said this was an equal rarity comparison. It really isn't, because Toxtricity has an extra coin flip of to whether or not it gets a nature that can actually make it be a the amped form that you're looking for. And of the ones that can be amped, 2 of them, I guess, for skill down. As far as skill down, 2 of them are skill down. Actually, 3 of them are skill down. All of the skill down natures are on amped. So it's going to be very difficult to get a good amped, because there's only a few natures that are actually beneficial, and almost all the bad natures go towards the amped form. So it's going to be a very difficult Pokemon to get a good one of, and even if you get a good one of, it's probably the worst of the 2 options. Which is why I want to discuss low-key form in compared to Magnezone. Now, it looks worse on paper. And it once again, is worse on paper because Magnezone has a stronger skill. Cooking Power-Up S increases the pot size by 31, whereas Minus increases it by 24, with the added effect that you can gain energy if it has other plus or minus Pokemon on the team. 24 is weaker than 31, outright. But not by as much as you would think, because, and there's a heavy asterisk with this, which I will circle back to. But, as of right now in the game, the maximum pot size is 69. 69 plus 31 is 100, and 69 plus 24 is 93. If we look at the meals that we can reach from 69 by getting a single proc of the skill, because this skill really doesn't gain much value from having extra filler added, unless you're trying to use it for off-week prep. But if you're using it for off-week prep, just run it for longer, even if it is weaker. You'll eventually hit the 200 cap anyway. It's not that difficult. But anyway, if we look at the meals that you can make with 93, Hidden Power Perk Up Stew is 92, 77 here with the Corn Keema Curry. Down here in the salads, we have nothing. But Zing Zap Cola and Flower Gift Macarons are all accessible with 93 ingredients. If we go up to 100 ingredients, that adds a single meal to the roster of Defiant Coffee Dress Salad. If you are targeting Defiant Coffee Dress Salad specifically, then Magnezone's ability to reach this meal with a single proc instead of with 2 procs is infinitely more valuable. I guess not infinitely more valuable, but is way more valuable than Toxtricity needing 2. But if you're targeting Zing Zap Cola, Flower Gift Macarons, Hidden Power Perk Up Stew, or Inferno Corn Keema Curry, for those 4 meals, they functionally are the same, because a single proc is going to get you to be able to make the meal. If you are talking about Katsukiyaki Curry, Apple Acid Yogurt Dress Salad, or Clodsire Eclairs, it doesn't matter if it gives you 31 or 24, both are going to require 2 procs. So for those meals, it doesn't matter either. Unless you're running the skill at a lower level or do not have your pot size maxed out, the only meal that it matters for that there's a difference in the amount is Defiant Coffee Dress Salad. So unless you're targeting Defiant, then these two, the number of procs is really what we're looking at, not the number of pot size increases for what makes them good. And by that evaluation, even before we account for the energy that Toxtricity low-key form can provide when it's synergizing, it's still actually doing a little bit better than the Magnezone. Now, it's such a small degree that honestly I consider this basically negligible, the difference. But it's comparable. It does cost an extra main skill seed, but it has the added bonus that it can be synergized with another net plus or minus Pokemon. But the heavy asterisk is this is all for right now. Magnezone is definitely more resilient to power creep, so I don't want to suggest investing low-key form thinking that it's going to be permanently your long-term thing, that like, oh, if I don't ever intend to make Defiant Coffee Dress Salad, it's alright, it's going to be the same between either of these, because they could add more meals. We're pretty much guaranteed to get more meals and a bigger pot size once the Amber Canyon comes around. That's been the consistent cycle they've been doing for both Lapis and for Old Gold Power Plant. I assume it's probably going to be the same for Amber Canyon, so we'll probably see bigger meals. We'll probably see a bigger pot size. Who knows what sort of meal might actually require in the future that we get 31 instead of just 24. Or if it's between the range that 24 to 31 can make the difference. That 7 ingredient range there might be more meals they add one day. So, given that, Magnezone is more resilient to game updates and potential changes than this would be. But I don't think, like I said, it's a 7 ingredient difference. I'm not sure we'll see too many meals fit exactly within those 7 ingredients. So it might be worth considering for that. That has the chance to be buffed to provide energy if you synergize it. But I think there's actually a case for running low-key form, even without another plus or minus Pokemon on the team. Just because it is technically better than Magnezone for a number of procs. And then for grins and giggles, I also made this comparison, in case you had the idea of running a Toxel, because Ingredient Magnet S actually does give you more ingredients every time it procs than the plus skill does. But just in case you had the ideas, I gave this thing the best stats possible, because maybe you could make the argument of, well, what if I want the Ingredient Magnet variant, but mine got a gentle nature, and that would make it low-key form. And I don't want low-key. I'm just going to keep it a Toxel. Yeah, don't do that, please. If you catch something like this, just make it into the low-key form and try to find a way to use that. Because even with the 2,000-hour ribbon, it's not even coming close to performing even just some mid-Vaporeons in Heracross. These guys do way better. And it even loses to a mid-form of itself. Sure, plus maybe weaker in the number of raw ingredients proc, but amped form is procking so much more often than Toxel is. That realistically, it's still making 6.5 of each ingredient in this comparison versus 5.9. Even with some crazy, crazy stats on the Toxel compared to this Toxtricity amped. So, you're best evolving it. Big shocker there. That actually is kind of a shocker sometimes. But in this case, it shouldn't come as a shocker. It's a baby Pokemon. Baby Pokemon should not remain babies in this game. Evolve them. It is the optimal way to go about things. Unless you just really like a baby and want to flex that you're using a baby. But that's a whole different discussion. That's more the cool factor and what brings you fun in the game, not what's optimal. What's optimal is evolving it. But anyway, that's pretty much all there is to discuss about Toxel and Toxtricity. They're pretty interesting Pokemon. I don't think they're great. I think they're good at the niches that they can do. But the niches that they can do are exactly that, niche. If you need the niche that they can provide, they're going to do pretty decent at that job. But they're going to have a pretty high investment cost compared to other Pokemon that I think can do the same sorts of things. So unless you really need that niche, I'd say maybe pass up on the Toxel, Toxtricity. If you do need the niche, then maybe hunt them. But that's about what I'd say. If you have enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Down in the description, we'll have a link to join the Discord. You can come join us, hang out, talk about all things Pokemon Sleep and the like. A huge thank you to all my channel members. It really means a lot to me that you guys want to show your support financially, despite there being no paid rewards for members. If you too want to become a channel member and are financially capable of doing so, the join button is down below. And as always, I thank you all for watching and hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.